Hello class, it's Professor Streeter, and I'm going to present the second essay assignment in this video. I have a document that I've shared with you on D2L in the Essay 2 Proposal and Introduction assignment folder, and we can look at it right now, and I'll talk about the essay assignment. Okay, let me show you where to find it. Here in the announcements, you can find a link to the prompt in the announcements. You can also find it here in the assignments under Essay 2 Proposal and Intro, and you can also find it here in our weekly content menu. Week 9, we're talking about contractarianism this week. I've shared some videos about the social contract here that I made a while ago, and here is the reading. There's also some videos from Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi philosophy videos, and a crash course video on the social contract tradition that you can watch for this week. But the Essay 2 proposal is here. You click here, it takes you to the prompt. Here, let me make myself a student. So if you click here as well, it takes you to the prompt, which you can download as a PDF file or a docx file here. The essay is due at the very end of the semester on December 8th, but the proposal and the draft of your introduction are due next week. So I want you to start thinking about it this week. Okay, let me open up the document. And here's what it looks like. So as before, the goal is to write a 1,500 word or about a 5-page double-spaced essay, a little more than 5 pages, or a little less is okay, but aim for about 5 or 6 pages. And it has to address themes from the course. I'm really encouraging you to come up with your own topic for this final essay. But I've shared some topics with you here if you're struggling. But I'd like you to write about a topic that interests you, an ethical issue that you're interested in thinking about. So it must contain an introduction that introduces a thesis. Think about the structure of the essay again. Body paragraphs that provide support. And then a concluding paragraph that draws a concrete conclusion about the implications of your thesis that you've introduced. A works cited page at the end, so that has to include at least 2 references, one from The Ethical Life and one from the Fundamentals of Ethics. You can do outside research as well. So as I said, the proposal and the introduction and the works cited page, I'd also like an introduction draft, and the works cited page are due on November 9th. And that's next week, sometime next week. And then before Thanksgiving, the goal is to turn in a rough draft before Thanksgiving so you can go on break and relax a little bit. And then you come back from the Thanksgiving break and you've got a little time before December 8th to turn in the final draft. Okay? So again, I encourage you to construct your own topic on an ethical issue that matters to you. But if that's something you're struggling to do, I'm going to share some suggestions here, suggested topics. So here's the first one. If you notice in the book, The Ethical Life, Part 4, the title of that section is Moral Problems. It looks at, and we've already been reading selections from that section of the book. So there are 2 essays, for example, one by Norcross and one by Carruthers, that defend very different positions about the moral status of animals. That's something you could explore. Or you could look at the debate between Singer and O'Neill on how to approach famine relief, right? The article by Peter Singer on global poverty, defending a utilitarian approach to famine relief, can compare and contrast that with the more Kantian approach that O'Neill discusses in her essay. So choosing a pair of essays that present different perspectives or different points of view on an ethical issue, whether it's the moral status of animals, our responsibilities to famine relief. Okay, so you could work through or look through the moral problems in Part 4 and choose one that interests you. And then you're looking at 2 articles or more articles. You could do some research of your own. And you're writing an essay in which you would criticize or defend the arguments from the articles you chose to read, and drawing a conclusion about the wider implications of the view that you've defended. Okay, so you're you're entering a conversation on a particular moral problem in part 4, comparing your view to the views of those you're reading, and then developing your own conclusion. Okay? That's one option. If you could also look at the section 2 of the ethical life and read, focusing on the Kant and Mill and the utilitarian approach and the Kantian approach, or also look at the contractarian approach in part 2 of the ethical life. And then focusing on those relevant chapters in the fundamentals of ethics. So utilitarianism is discussed in chapter 9 and 10. The Kantian approach is developed in chapter 11 and 12, and the contractarian approach is developed in chapter 13 and 14 of Schaefer-Landau. And if you notice in part 2 of Theories of Right Conduct in the Ethical Life, we have selections from Mill on utilitarianism, we have a selection from Kant on the goodwill, and a selection from Hobbes on the social contract theory. So you could look at those 3 readings in the Ethical Life and some of the chapters in Schaefer-Landau. And then the goal would be, based on the choices you made in terms of what readings you're focusing on, you'd be making an argument that gives an analysis and a critique of the theory of utilitarianism. Introducing an ethical dilemma to test the utilitarian principle, and then considering objections to the theory from another perspective, so either the Kantian perspective or the contractarian perspective. And then either defend or reject the theory based on the argument you've developed. Okay, so this is giving an opportunity to look at utilitarian theory and then either defend it or criticize it from either a Kantian point of view or the contractarian point of view, and drawing a conclusion about the relationship between the rightness of an action and its consequences. So here, the larger question you'd be answering in your essay is, what is the fundamental measure of right action? Is the utilitarian right that the measure of right action has to do with its consequences and the promotion of the greatest happiness for the greatest number? Or are there problems with that view that you can criticize from a Kantian perspective or a contractarian perspective? Okay, so again, there's a lot here in Schaefer-Landau to help you make that argument. If you'd rather, you could start right from a Kantian perspective and try to defend or criticize that, looking at what the utilitarian would say, or you could look at the contractarian position and try to defend that or criticize that from either the Kantian or the utilitarian perspective. So you could adapt this topic to your interests. But at the center of the essay would be a dilemma or a case study that you construct on your own as a way of testing the principle, testing whether this is the right way of thinking about the fundamental measure of right action. Okay, let me move along. There are many case studies, cases for critical reflection at the end of chapters in Schaefer-Landau, and I give you a list of the chapters that you can draw from. You could look at some of those case studies and choose to write about one. Okay, from chapter 6, chapter 10, chapter 12, chapter 14, chapter 15, 17, and 18. There are a variety of cases for critical reflection. And so the goal would be to develop an argument in defense of one of the following approaches to ethics, focusing on that particular case: natural law theory, utilitarianism, Kantianism, contractarianism, or virtue theory. So you'd be using the case study, the case for critical reflection, to illustrate why one approach makes more sense than the other, and then draw a conclusion about the nature and the source of our moral responsibilities to each other. Okay, so that's another way of approaching the topic. You could go back to Kwame Anthony Appiah's piece in part 4 of The Ethical Life. What will future generations condemn us for? And that could be the context for identifying an ethical issue of your own in your own terms, right? Or that you think we should be taking more seriously. So something in our society that you think we should be taking more seriously, explaining what the ethical issue is, why it's important to care about, and then applying 2 or more of the approaches to ethics that we've considered, and defending an answer to the question, what should be done in response to this issue and why? So looking at the issue from a Kantian perspective, a utilitarian perspective, and developing an answer to the question, what should we do? And how would you defend that from one perspective or another? Okay, what does morality demand of us in this situation and why? Right, that's the goal of that. That's one way to think about the structure of the essay. Finally, if you would like, you could choose an issue that is you think pressing and urgent, that relates to your local politics or a local ethical or political issue, and write a letter to your local representative or government representative from your home state, or if you're not from Illinois, from your home country, okay. So if you're taking this course from another country, that's fine. But writing a letter to a local representative, identifying a public policy that matters to you and that you think raises important ethical questions. Do some research on that public policy or that law or that issue, and frame the problem in the letter, and then discuss the history of the policy initiative and advocate for a policy change or propose a concrete solution to the problem. Okay, so that would be a letter that you write and mail. I can't test whether you mail it, but it's writing something in the form of a letter that you could send to a representative, advocating for a policy change, proposing a concrete solution to the problem that you've identified. And that letter should be relatively short, 1 or 2 pages. But in addition to the letter, I'd like you to summarize and analyze the research and the argument that you've made. Okay, so write up a summary of the research you've done and a summary of the argument that you've made, expand it a little bit. So ultimately, you'd still be writing 5 pages. The letter would be 1 or 2 pages, and then the summary of the argument you've made and the research you've done would be 3 or 4 pages. Okay. So those are 5 different options for the essay. You get to choose. I encourage you to write an email to me and set up a time to meet if you're confused or you're not sure what you want to do with the essay assignment. Okay, that's all for now. I'm going to end this video. Hope that was useful.